Okay, let's just jump right in with one of the biggest, most mind-bending questions you could possibly ask. Is any of this real? I mean, are we living inside some kind of gigantic, unbelievably complex computer simulation? It totally sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but this idea has seriously moved from late-night chats into the world of physics and philosophy. So for the next few minutes, we're going to unpack what this idea really means and where the debate is right now. And the best place to start is often with a simple metaphor. A user over on Reddit's metaphysics forum just nailed it. Think about a computer program, right? Before you run it, it's just potential, just a bunch of ones and zeros sitting on a drive. But the second you hit run, a whole world just springs to life. And for the characters inside that world, it would feel completely 100% real. It's a really compelling modern way to think about how a universe could be created. But almost immediately, another user jumps in with a fantastic point. The moment you say once the software is fired up, you've already brought the concept of time into the picture. The time itself needs events to happen one after the other. So this simple metaphor of a program starting already assumes one of the most fundamental parts of the reality it's trying to explain. See? It's not so simple. And then another user adds this really crucial layer. Software doesn't just exist in a void. It needs a physical computer. It needs hardware to run on. And that hardware has to exist before the software can even do anything. So if our reality is the software, what's the hardware? And wouldn't that hardware be the actual base reality? You can't have a simulation that somehow creates the computer it's running on. This whole back and forth just happening on a public forum is a perfect snapshot of a much bigger, much more formal debate. This isn't just a fun little thought experiment anymore. It's a serious idea that people are wrestling with, and it's called the simulation hypothesis. So let's do that. Let's take this up a level, from a cool metaphor to a full-blown theory, and see what the argument actually looks like. So at its core, the hypothesis is basically this. Everything we think of as physical reality, from the farthest star down to the chair you're sitting on right now, is actually the output of a ridiculously sophisticated computer program. And us, we, along with everything we've ever known, would just be part of this artificial world, a world generated by some civilization way, way more advanced than we are. Now, the really crucial part of the argument is all about probability. It's a numbers game. If it's possible for a civilization to create super realistic simulations of their past, what they call ancestor simulations, they would probably run millions, maybe billions of them. Just think of how many video games and movies we create. If that's the case, then the number of simulated realities would just dwarf the one single base reality. So statistically speaking, it's just far more likely that we're in one of the countless simulations, not the one original universe. It's a really compelling argument, I'll give it that, but it is definitely not without its problems. In fact, when you start to really look at the details, some pretty serious cracks start to show up in the code of this whole hypothesis. 10 to the power of 68. So what is that number? Well, let's talk about that hardware problem again. Physicists have estimated that to simulate our universe all the way down to the atomic level, you need a computer with roughly 10 to the power of 68 transistors. Now, to put that insane number in perspective, that is more transistors than there are atoms in the entire known universe. You will literally need a computer bigger than the very universe you're trying to simulate. That's a pretty big roadblock. And then there's what's called the recursion problem. So if a civilization can create a convincing simulation with conscious beings inside it, then it stands to reason that those simulated beings could eventually develop the tech to create their own simulations, right? This leads you down a rabbit hole of simulations inside of simulations, potentially forever. It's like a cosmic set of Russian nesting dolls, and it raises some serious questions about how stable that could possibly be. These technical arguments are fascinating, but the whole simulation debate actually points to a much older, much deeper question, one that gets to the very heart of what we even mean by real. Is the fundamental stuff of the universe matter, or is it mind? And this is exactly where the debate moves beyond bits and bytes and enters the world of academic philosophy. The argument stops being about processing power and starts being about the fundamental nature of reality itself. So, the simulation hypothesis is kind of a high-tech version of a very old philosophical idea called idealism. You've got two main camps here. On one side, you have scientific materialism, which is pretty much the dominant worldview today. It says that physical stuff, matter, is the base of reality, and our consciousness is just a fancy byproduct of chemical reactions in our brains. But on the other side, you have neo-idealism, and it completely flips the script. It argues that consciousness is the fundamental reality, and the physical world, including our brains, is something that appears within that consciousness. Now, the idealist's big trump card is something called the hard problem of consciousness. See, science is amazing at explaining what the brain does, how neurons fire, how we process information, but it has totally failed to explain why we have subjective experiences at all. Why does the color red look red? Why does music make you feel something? Materialism really struggles to explain the gap between a physical process and a personal feeling. And this is just a brilliant way to illustrate the idealist critique. The philosopher Bernardo Kastrup uses this powerful analogy. He says that matter is just a concept, right? It's an idea our minds created to make sense of our experiences. So for materialists to turn around and say that the mind is just a product of matter, well, Kastrup says it's like a painter who finishes a self-portrait, points to it and says, I am nothing but that paint on the canvas. It's a completely circular argument. So if we're not just our brains, what are we? Well, in this idealist view, Kastrup offers another beautiful metaphor. Imagine a universal cosmic consciousness that's like a vast stream. Our individual minds, you, me, everybody, we aren't separate things. We're more like whirlpools that form in that stream. We're temporary, localized patterns, for sure, but we are still fundamentally made of the same water, the same single consciousness. Okay, I know, this is all getting pretty abstract. Simulations, cosmic consciousness, whirlpools in a stream, but does any of this actually matter in our day-to-day lives? Well, according to these thinkers, the answer is a huge, resounding yes. It matters because our basic worldview shapes everything about how we live. The materialist view, which can paint us as just random biological accidents in a pointless universe, can lead to this deep sense of isolation and meaninglessness. And some argue this is what fuels a culture of selfishness and just endless consumerism. But an idealist perspective suggests our lives are inherently meaningful. If we're all part of one cosmic consciousness, that fosters a profound sense of connection to each other and to the entire universe. So we kind of end up right back where we started with that computer metaphor. Whether you want to call it a simulation or a user interface or a whirlpool in a stream, the core idea is the same. The world that we see and experience every day might not be the fundamental reality. And the ultimate question then isn't just, is it true, but so what? If this life is an experience being had, how does that change the way you have it? That's really something to think about.